Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, my dear students. This is Dr. Muhammad Shafiq, lecturer of philosophy, Department of Islamic and Pakistan Studies Cust. The course I'm teaching you during this semester is called Kalam in Philosophy of Islam, and the course code is ISL 471. Today in this lecture we are going to discuss and we are going to look into what rationalism is, what position it holds in philosophy in general and in epistemology in particular. So let's move on and see what does rationalism mean. The outline of today's lecture consists upon what is rationalism, the meanings of rationalism, then we are going to look into the history of rationalism, and we are going to touch Rene Descartes, the modernist rationalist, and a few other rationalists during the course of this lecture. So let's move on to the next slide. So what does rationalism mean basically, or what is rationalism? Simply, rationalism is an epistemological school of thought in epistemology which basically holds reason as the primary source of knowledge, and it holds that abstract reasoning provides certain truths and there are innate ideas and a priori truths. So rationalism can be defined as such that it is an epistemological position in which reason is said to be the primary source of all knowledge, and reason is considered to be superior to the senses or sense perception. Generally speaking, rationalists believe that abstract reasoning can produce undeniable and absolutely certain truths about nature, existence, and the whole of reality. So, reason being the sole or the primary source of our knowledge, and these truths are called the truths. These truths are called uh, these truths provided by reason are these truths are called a priori truths or innate ideas because they are discovered independently of experience or sense perception and without empirical observation or experimentation. So these are the absolute and undeniable truths because these do not depend upon our senses, and we know for a reason that our senses can deceive us, and a faculty or a source which can deceive us cannot be a primary or certain source of knowledge. It is reason which provides us the uncertain, undeniable truths about reality. So, reason is the sole source of knowledge. Rationalism encompasses several strands of thought, all of which usually share the conviction that reality is actually rational in nature, and that making the proper deductions is essential to achieving knowledge. Now, let's move on and see what does rationalism literally mean. Rationalism is basically a term derived from Latin word ratio, which means reason or intellect. In that context, rationalism would entail the belief in reason, the full confidence in reason or intellect. So it basically follows that philosophical view of rationalism is considering reason as the chief source of knowledge. And that is why another concept in rationalism or closely related to it is that of enlightenment. Um Enlightenment basically was a European movement, European intellectual movement, which began in 17th and 18th centuries, in which ideas concerning God, reason, nature, and humanity were synthesized into a worldview that gained widespread ascent in the West and instigated revolutionary development in art and philosophy and politics. Central to Enlightenment thought was the use and celebration of reason as the sole and the only source and means of knowledge, and the power by which humans understand the universe and improve their own condition. The goals of rational humanity were considered to be knowledge, freedom, and happiness. So, modern Europe basically is founded upon this principle of enlightenment, and they consider reason to be the standard of knowledge and reason to be the standard of all modernity, basically. So, let's move on to the next slide and see what is the history of rationalism. The first Western philosophy to stress upon rationality or rationalist approach was that of Pythagoreans or Pythagoras, a Greek philosopher. He was a shadowy figure of the 6th century BCE. Noticing that for a right triangle, a square built on its hypotenuse equals the sum of those on its sides, and that pitches of notes sounded on a lute bear a mathematical relation to the lengths of the strings. Pythagoras basically held that these harmonies reflected the ultimate nature of the reality. He summed up and implied metaphysical rationalism in the words that all is number. And as we know, this number is something not physical, it's not something concrete, it is an idea. Numbers are abstract. So, in order to know this abstract reality, we need to have reason, we need to use our mind. So, mind is the source through which we can gain knowledge. If, and by knowledge, obviously, they meant to know the reality, and for them, reality is number. So, numbers cannot be known through sense perception. In this context, we can say Pythagoras was one of the earliest rationalists in Greek philosophy. Then comes the famous character of Plato. Uh, Plato is considered to be one of the most influential philosophers of all times, along with Aristotle. Mm, As we know, Plato, basically this mm, epistemology is closely related to metaphysics. So if we go back to Platonic metaphysics, we know that he presented the idea of the ideal world. By ideal world, he means that this world is the copy of that idea, it's the copy of that ideal world. So, so if the reality is ideal and it's not physical in nature, then obviously in order to know that reality, we must use our mind, we must use our reason to know the reality, and that cannot be known through our senses. So for Plato, this world is basically the copy of the real world, which is ideal in nature. Somewhere there is ideas, and those ideas basically gave birth to this physical world. So in order to know the reality, we need to use our brain, our mind, and our reason, intellect. And that is how Plato is one of the very strong and very uh, famous proponent of rationalism. And after his demise, after Plato's philosophy, Aristotle being his pupil, although Aristotle did not agree with Plato in all his metaphysical aspects of metaphysical philosophy, but there were certain things in which Aristotle seconded Plato, and in this rationalism, uh, an aspect of syllogistic logic for Aristotle that is basically rationalist approach, because the syllogistic logic can be known through reason or intellect, but nothing comparable in importance to their thought appeared in rationalistic philosophy in next 800 years, though the work of St. Thomas Aquinas. After Aristotle, we'll move on to the next slide and we'll see where are the modern rationalists stand. The more important aspect of rationalism is called a modern rationalism. As we saw that in the case of empiricism, the British empiricists hold a central position in empiricist school of thought. Similarly, in rationalism, the modern rationalism holds a strong footing in rationalism as a school of thought. And Rene Descartes, a French philosopher, is considered to be the father of modernity, and his slogan was, "I think, therefore I am." He tried to prove the existence of self through mind, through thinking. Uh, the first modern philosopher or first modern rationalist was Descartes, and originally he was a mathematician whose ambition was to introduce into the philosophy the rigor and clearness that delighted him in mathematics. He set out the doubt, he started with the doubt in everything, in the hope of arriving in end at some inaudible reality. This he read in his famous quote, cogito ergo sum, which started with debito ergo sum, which means I think, I doubt, therefore I am. After doubting his very existence, he comes to the conclusion that there is only one thing which cannot be doubted, and that is doubt. And doubt entails thinking, because doubting something entails thinking. We doubt things with our mind. So that means if I can doubt, means I think. And that says that if I think, if I am thinking, that means I do exist. If I did not exist, obviously I won't be able to think and I won't be able to doubt. So if I am doubting, logically speaking, that means I am thinking. And if I am thinking, that means I do exist. So that is how he proved the existence through intellect or through mind. The impact of Rene Descartes has a very immense on philosophy in general and in modernity in particular, and that brought a kind of revolution into and that's how if you remember we discussed earlier about the Enlightenment. He is also considered to be the father of Enlightenment in this context and modernity. And this was basically Descartes' method, which was also adopted by Baruch Spinoza and uh, another French philosopher, and then Leibniz, a German philosopher, and which later on led to Hegel. But Spinoza and Leibniz agreed with the framework of things that could be dependent upon reason. They differed from him, however, from Descartes, however, in their starting points. What was most undeniable to Spinoza was not the existence of his self, but that of the universe, called by him substance. From the idea of substance, and with the aid of a few definitions and axioms, he derived his entire system, which he set forth in his book called Ethics, in a formal fashion patterned after Euclid geometry. Still, for both Spinoza and Leibniz, much in nature remained stubbornly opaque. Leibniz, on the other hand, distinguished necessary truths, those of which the opposite in impossible, as in mathematics, from contingent truths, the opposite of which is possible, such as snow is white, but was this an ultimate distinction? At times, Leibniz said boldly that if only humans knew enough, they would see that every true proposition was necessarily true. Basically, if we just go back and try to remember the metaphysics of Leibniz, you may recall that Leibniz basically presented the idea that this universe is composed of atoms, which he called monads, and those monads are ideal in nature. They are not physical, they are not some physical substance like atoms. The monad's existence is ideal in nature. So if this universe is composed of monads, which are ideal in nature, again, in order to know these monads, we must use our intellect or our reason, because ideas cannot be known through senses. So as I said earlier, the metaphysics and the epistemology are closely related. All those metaphysicians who believed that this universe is made of idea rather than matter, that those people basically are rationalists in the sense, because you cannot know the ideas by you cannot know the ideas by sense perception. You have to have reason. So after Leibniz, there comes another very famous name, that is Hegel. Hegel is basically, he was also a rationalist, and he believed in absolute idea as the reality of this universe. So in order to know again absolute idea, we must use our reason, and that's how he was a rationalist. But his dialectical idealism, he's also considered to be the father of German idealism. All those German idealists basically acknowledge uh, Hegel as one of the prominent figures in German idealism, and it was Hegel who basically presented the idea of dialectical idealism, which was later on adopted by Marx and converted that into the dialectical materialism. The idea was that of Hegel, but the difference between Hegel and Marx was that of the nature of the reality. And for Hegel, it was ideal, while Marx used it as a matter. But anyway, Hegel was also a very famous rationalist. So then comes another German philosopher, Immanuel Kant. Kant cannot be, strictly speaking, cannot be called a rationalist, pure rationalist. What Kant tried to do was basically in order to reconcile both rationalism and empiricism. And his book, Critique of Pure Reason, was a kind of a groundbreaking work in philosophy. And in this critique of pure reason, he basically tried to show the limits of reason, that there are certain limits of reason, and we also need some kind of sense perception in order to gain certain knowledge, and then we have our reason or intellect to supplement that. He calls his philosophy as a Copernican revolution in philosophy, because it brought a kind of Copernican revolution in epistemology in particular, because he was the first one who tried to show that there are limitations of human reason. And there are certain things which are beyond reason, and we have to acknowledge these. And that's what they call phenomena and noumena. Phenomena for him, things as they appear to us. He called them phenomena, or the physical appearance. And then he calls there is another aspect of reality which is noumena, and that is things in themselves. So these things in themselves basically are beyond the knowledge of human being. We cannot really know. That is the limitation of our mind. And uh, that's how there are certain religious principles which we can bring into the light as a reality, because reason is not the standard of knowledge. Reason, I, I, I remember the quote of one of our great Sufis who says that reason can take you to the door of the house, but it cannot take you inside the house. That basically means reason can lead us to the reality, but what reality is in fact, that is something beyond the power of reason, and that is intuitive reality. And what is intuition or what is intuitivism, that we are going to see in our next lecture. Uh, these are the couple of websites. Plato, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, and Britannica. These are very, very important and very comprehensive, very helpful websites you can consult in order to know these basic concepts of philosophy, as well as these couple of books. So if you have any other any questions or any comments, please do let me know, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Till then, take care of yourself, and Allah Hafiz for now.